Why do we learn? What do we learn? And how do we learn? These were some of the questions I wanted to answer when I started this podcast. This is an audio and video show where I interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, I interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, I hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Today's guest, Manoj Ajit Panicker, is someone I met at a film festival here in Mumbai. I saw his film, Sombre Skies, which I will also be linking. I'll be linking information about the film in the show notes. But a little bit about Manoj before we jump into the conversation. Manoj is an emerging filmmaker and architect with a passion for storytelling. A graduate of the College of Architecture, Trivandrum, Manoj worked as an architect in Oman for 2 years, cultivating his creative expertise. In 2024, Manoj made his directorial debut with his short film Sombre Skies, marking the beginning of his filmmaking journey. With a strong foundation in design and a keen eye for detail, Manoj aims to bring a unique perspective to the film industry. So, Manoj, thank you so much for making time for this interview. I really appreciate the time. I wanted to start this interview with an open-ended question, Manoj. I'd love because when I saw Somber Skies, the way you characterized and build the character of the young girl that was going through grief, I was really curious about your own childhood memories. So what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? And can you tell me some stories from your childhood?
Okay, first of all, uh, I appreciate you for inviting me to your podcast. So I grew up I spent a little of my childhood in Kerala, in my hometown in Hyderabad. And if you're not familiar with that time period, there was a huge tsunami that hit across the southern shores of India at the time. And I was living in Alapura, which had the warning of the tsunami hitting there. And so I grew up with a scare at the time because a lot of people were afraid of when they saw the news and when they were seeing the huge tidal wave hitting at the time. So there was a lot of fear of death going around, and I was probably around 7 or 8 at the time. And almost around the same time, my mother's father passed away, and so I would say like the ideas of death and afterlife, they have been concepts that have been haunting throughout my entire life. Like, for example, when I was small and I used to sleep with my parents, I used to check the sound of their breathing to know that they're alive. And when I couldn't hear the sound because, there are window ACs here and they're like really loud. And when I couldn't hear the breathing of this, so what I would do is that I would look at their chest to see if it was moving. So that's how much the concepts of death and afterlife have been affecting me throughout. And I guess that's what really draws me towards storytelling as well. Like it's a medium for me to explore these same concepts in my own way, and I think that's what really drew me to the story of Somber Skies as well. When once I got the material, I knew that this was what I should be doing for my debut short film as well.
That's amazing, Manoj. And I know before filmmaking, architecture was one of your big passions and still is, your profession in a lot of ways. So, where did this curiosity for architecture emerge for you, and how did you? What I know you studied at the government at the College of Architecture Trivandrum, which is the short form as CAT. So, where did the curiosity emerge, and what was your experience in that 5-year course at CAT as well?
I would say my father is a civil engineer, and so watching him in his office growing up, and I spend a lot of time in the office as well. So that I think that's where the interest really came to me, and a lot of it came from the people that I know who have pursued this course, like the way they talk about the course and how if you have a real passion for art and architecture in general, I guess that's what really drew me to the course. If you're talking about the experience, I mean, it is a mix of a lot of hectic schedule and finding the passion for it as well. Like, I'd say throughout this 5 year course, maybe like for the first 3 years, I was really enjoying the process, like getting to know the different art forms that came around the world that are currently trending in the world right now, and the way different techniques that people used in their buildings, how that inspired me and all. And I think towards that, the second half of that career is where I not that I lost interest in the course or anything, but I the way I see my fellow colleagues in my college, the way they see the art from, I think I knew this that there was something missing there, like the fire inside of them that kept on till the end. I think somewhere along the line, I was looking for that fire, and I didn't get that through architecture necessarily. And along that same time is when I really started going into filmmaking as well, because the amount of discussion that goes around filmmaking in Kerala is like completely different from where I grew up in Oman. Because there are like names like Anurag Kashyap and Christopher Nolan. They're like household names. Like a lot of people talk about them regularly, and so yeah, like the amount discussion that happened there really changed me. Um, so yeah,
And like one of the things I really enjoyed doing when I was preparing for this, Manoj, I was looking through your Letterboxd profile. There are over 1,000 films that you have reviewed and spoken about. I will be linking that in the show notes. But I think what was really beautiful was how, like as a viewer, you were able to identify so many different elements of a film, right? And I think there is an experience of being a filmmaker, but also an experience of being a film watcher. So, growing up, what were some of the first films you remember watching and you have like distinct memories of as a child?
I mean, speaking about my early memories, like one of the first three memories of my life is that of a film, and it's one specific film in one specific scene in Jurassic Park. It's a scene where the T-Rex first gets revealed, and the children are sitting in the car. They're hearing this huge footsteps, and there's a shot of the boy looking at a glass, and there's a water in it, and you see the surface tension of the water changing as the T-Rex comes closer, and that's one of the first experience of my life, and those are the things that really influenced me throughout my life as well. I think like throughout my school life, I wasn't exactly that focused on appreciating films as well. Like I was mostly focused on commercial films and the regional cinema from Malayalam industry. As I said before, college is where I really started exploring more art forms because what architecture does is that it invokes a certain level of criticism for other art. Criticism not as in a negative way, but as in an appreciation of the things that works and the things that could have worked better. And one thing I noticed in architecture is that a lot of things that people learn in filmmaking visually is closely related to some of the things that we learn in architecture as well. So like the rules of symmetry, Jessol's law, and a lot of the visual elements that we learn in architecture, they're also applicable to filmmaking as well, to visual storytelling. And I think that's what really I apply to the reviews that I put on Letterboxd or appreciating film as well. Like something that I noticed at Mami when I attended is that whenever I talk to filmmakers about their films, like when I met Shruti Talati and I talked to about Girls Who Be Girls, I was specifically talking about how architecture was used in the film, like how the repetitive architecture elements in that were used to, show the amount of order that we face in boarding schools and all that. So, so yeah, I think um, in a way, the course itself helped me appreciate films in way more than I could imagine.
That's very interesting because I feel like your perspective as an architect is in some way shaping your perspective as a filmmaker. You see both these professions sort of. And when you spoke about Mami, I remember seeing a film there, In Retreat, by Mehsam Ali, where
Mm,
for me, I think one of the defining characters in the film was actually the place where it was shot. And
mm,
I thought there was a transformation of the place as the film started and ended. And I think it's really fascinating to see how settings can be such an important role in like films as well. So that was really interesting to hear, Manoj. But in terms of Malayali cinema, I'm a very big fan of Malayali cinema, and I feel like it's something that we should really be proud of as Indians. But for me, my introduction to Malayali cinema was more recent, in the 2005s, 2010s, with actors like Fahd Fasal and some of those films coming out. But I'm really curious about the history of Malayali cinema, like where did it first start evolving from, and how did it get to this point where you have such original, unique stories that are so rooted in those local communities?
I mean, if you're going back to the 60s and 70s, it was mostly about, holding a commercial value because, Malayalam cinema has been grappling with tight financial constraints for a long time. And I think towards the earlier stage, they were still trying to hold their commercial value, like talking about stories that will be more accessible to the public. And it's more towards the 70s and 80s, more often the 70s. The 80s is called like the golden era of Malayalam cinema because that is where you see good movies coming from every genre and from every filmmaker. That like it's kind of like Tamil cinema nowadays. That's how the 80s was for Malayalam cinema. Like there were great commercial movies. There were great art house content like from G. Aravindan and Adur Gopalakrishnan. And there were also filmmakers who tried to bridge the gap between art house and commercial, like Padmarajan and Bharathan and many filmmakers like that. And it slowly went to a decline during the late 90s and the early 2000s when I think there was a small amount of, financial crisis that was going on in the industry, and people were trying to overcompensate it by bringing formulas that is so in masala movies that is so in other industries. So there was a slight decline there, and then towards the 2010, with movies like Chapa Kurish and Traffic, that is where this new wave of Malayalam cinema came up, which is more like filmmakers trying to return to the roots of the 80s. And I think this is where after I think during the period of COVID when people from other regions they were looking towards regional cinema, and then that's where people started looking to movies like Kumbalangi Nights and a lot of other films and all of this led to the amount of appreciation that the industry is getting this year. Like movies like Manjumal Boys and Avesham really going uh, to everywhere across India and gaining appreciation. And so yeah, a lot of it goes back to like filmmakers appreciating the things that Malayalam filmmakers did back in the 80s. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful because in India, I think we're lucky to have so many filmmaking traditions, and each state, in a way, has its own history and culture of making
Mm.
films, and I think that's something we can really look at and be inspired from as film lovers and filmmakers as well. Like with your education as a filmmaker, Manoj, I know you're largely self-educated. So how did you go about understanding the different elements of filmmaking? Like how did you learn about, like shooting a film? How did you learn about editing a film? How did you learn about sound and setting design? So how did you learn how to become a filmmaker? I'm really curious about that.
It didn't start as um, you know, having the drive to be a filmmaker at first. At first, I wanted to be a screenwriter. I mean, writing is what really draws me to every kind of media, whether it's movies or TV series or even video games. Like, it's the storytelling that really captivated me from the start. So that's where I really focused on. And I have some friends in my college itself. I have a close friend still now. He's really into this area of script writing, and I think a lot of what I learned about appreciating writing came from him. And when it comes to script writing as a professional medium, I learned it online. And then I also enrolled in a short course at FTI also. It was a online course, so I learned it from there. When it comes to filmmaking, a lot of what I learned till now is through videos that I saw on YouTube, through different content creators on Instagram. I mean, there are a lot of amazing channels that put out content based on editing and color grading, and even the types of the equipment that is available on set and the amount of work that gaffers put on set as well. Like there is a lot of coverage going on in Instagram channels or in YouTube, and even when it comes to complex areas like VFX, we have teams like Corridor Crew on YouTube who really go into detail about this. So yeah, a lot of it came from online, and I think by now a lot of the things that I learned about filmmaking came from making my first short film itself. Learning about the constraints and how scheduling goes on, and even about the workflow during the post production phase. I think I learned a lot of it when I made my first short film.
I got to see Sombre Skies this year and I was truly amazed, Manoj. And I really hope, it's able to reach more people, not just through the festivals, but even after that. Like with regards to Sombre Skies, Manoj, I was reading some of your Instagram posts, and you were speaking about you had photos of, there was one photo I remember you speaking where the cameraman had to stand in a body of water for a really long time to get a shot. And you also worked with the Dying Arts Collective to, get the team around it. So I'm curious about your process with the making of Somber Skies, from ideation to getting the film ready. Like how long did that journey take and what was involved in that journey? And also maybe what is the story that inspired Somber Skies as a writer as well?
Okay, so it was around December 2023 when one of my close friends, close to my family, she is a I mean, she was in that cancer remission period at the time, and she called my mother, and they went on for like 1 or 2 hours about the issues that they faced along that journey. And just like in my family, she also has an only son, and she talked about how she wanted to be with that son for a long time, at least till he grows up to, at least till the stage when he can, work on his own, support himself. And basically, 2 days after that, news came to us that she passed away. And that story really stood by me because, for one thing, like I mentioned before, that the kid was an only child. So, in a way, I could understand the pain that he was going through. And also, like I mentioned at the start of this interview, that the ideas of death and afterlife are ideas, a concept that have been haunting me. So, this story really stayed with me. And I guess a part of the reason why I got into writing the script for this short film is to just lay out my feelings into that story, how to deal with grief and all that, and that took around 1 week, 1.5 week to write the first draft and work through the second draft as well. And of course, I wrote it in English because I'm not that fluent in Malayalam, so it's been another week to get it translated properly into Malayalam. Um, and then it was around April, which is because we don't exactly have that many resources in Oman. So I had to wait till go to Kerala for that. And I wasn't exactly clear on how to get the crew because I didn't have that many contacts. And luckily, one of the juniors at my college, his name is Rohit, and he happened to be the co-founder of the group that you mentioned, the Dying Arts Collective. Basically, they meet filmmakers and they help them create the short films that they want under the tight budgets that they have. And so I got in touch with him, and basically he made the other arrangements of getting the cinematographer and the assistant directors and the people for the sing sound. And so and after that, that got ready pretty quickly, and then the main task was for getting the cast of the movie. And the interesting thing is that I wrote this script with a particular child in my mind. Like I see this child on a reality TV show in a Malayalam channel here, and I always felt that she had really good potential, and I don't know, like her body language and her face and the way she played the characters, it really fit for the protagonist of my story, Nandana. And so I wrote the script with her in my mind. I didn't have the hope of casting her, but let's just say through some contacts that we had, we got to her. And then when I saw the chemistry that she has with her mother, it kind of reminded me of how the kind of chemistry that my protagonist has with her mother. And so it only made sense to me that okay, the having this mother in the film would make sense. I kind of went the same direction Rima does when with Village Rockstars, I guess. Casting the mother-daughter dynamic in this. And then of course I got most of the people who play the minor side characters and the junior artists. They're actually friends and family from my own village, and they kind of help with the process. So yeah, that it got wrapped up within 2 days of shooting, because it was shot entirely at my home. Most of the scenes were at my home and next to the pond next to my home. And so yeah, we work with the resources that we had. We work with the people that we had. Like the only real work that went into this whole process was with gathering the crew and the cast. And I would say the crew did a really good job with scheduling the shoots under such a tight frame, because 2 days is still a tight frame for a short film. And post production, I guess it was easier because I was the one who was editing, and one of the crew member that was there for the production team, Basim. He was the one who handled coloring as well, so that was easier. The real challenge that came with post production was with sound design, because I was not entirely sure of the terms that the people used in sound design. So the person that I hired, Shabiri, um, he had a really tough time actually working with me, because there was a communication gap because of the because I wasn't able to properly tell him, okay, this is not working, or why this is not working this way. So yeah, I guess that's one thing that I learned from making the short film, to at least learn the basics of every department, because it would be easier to communicate with them as well. So yeah, like almost it took around 1 month to actually complete the project in total.
Yeah, that's great. For someone listening to this, Manoj, that also wants to make a short film themselves. So, like, with regards to budgeting, how much do you think they should budget for the entire project? And maybe what tips do you have to take their film and get it out into the world? Are film festivals like the only way to get your film out into the world, or are there other avenues to do that as well?
I mean, the easiest tip I could give is to spend as much on sound design as much as you did on the visuals, because something that I have heard from other filmmakers is that people will be more lenient towards movies if they have a good story, but if the visuals are not that great, but they should have good sound design, because if the sound design is bad, it wouldn't matter if the movie has good story and good visuals. It's an immediate killer, especially when it comes to film festival who are receiving like more than 2,000 entries per year. So if they immediately notice a problem with the sound, that's an immediate killer. They wouldn't watch it more than maybe 1 or 2 minutes of it. So make sure to actually invest really well in the sound department, whether it is sing sound or in the sound design music department. Always make sure to invest really good in that to at least make a decent experience with that. That's the easiest tip I can give regarding film festivals. And if you're an Indian filmmaker, another useful tip I notice is that always focus your resources on sending the movies to Indian film festivals in India and also in abroad. Like events like IFLA, ISAFF, Tasveer, like these are the film festivals that can really help spread your movie across the globe than other festivals. Because like I had my North American premiere in Canada through ISAFF, and I would say that was an amazing uh, experience, and I think we are talking about teams that are dedicated to encouraging filmmakers in India from the Indian diaspora. So make sure to always focus on those festivals at first. When it comes to budgeting, especially if you're making your first film, always make sure to use the resources that you already have, the location that you already have, some of the friends and family who can help you out, and always try to do some of the things yourself as well. Like I did the editing for Sombre Skies myself because it not just for handling the budget, but also because it helps you learn the craft yourself as well, and the difficulties and constraints that comes with it. Um, so yeah, these are things I think that I have to give from my experience.
Got it, Manoj. And I highly recommend if you ever get a chance to watch Somber Skies. I was lucky I got to watch it at Mami, but I hope there's a chance for other people to also access the film in the future, through a platform or through a live screening, Manoj. So, Manoj, I was thinking about your Letterboxd reviews, and I read like at least 10 to 11 reviews that you have written. I really enjoyed the remarkable life of Ibil in review because you spoke about your passion for video games and how you were able to see that in that review. I loved your Santosh review, the movie Santosh, because I got to see it recently, and I liked how you spoke about how the two characters had that relationship, right? So
Mm.
I was really intrigued by how you watch a film as a filmmaker, like, and that's something I struggle with. Whenever I watch a film, I always focus on the story, right?
Mm.
So as a filmmaker, like, when you watch a film, what are some of the things you try to notice? Like, how can you watch a film as a filmmaker and appreciate the different elements of
I mean, as someone who started with script writing, of course, story and the characters are what matters to me the most. But another thing, like I said before, because of how much we learned about the visual elements in architecture, I think that's an analysis that comes to me naturally when it comes to the visuals. Like, for example, even when it comes to the remarkable life of Evelyn, how they use the video game cutscenes to progress the story forward. Like, I think the I would say these are things that I think architecture kind of gave me that sense of analyzing the visual elements that comes with it. And I think listening to a lot of directors online, like listen to the interviews that they give, I think that will help you understand the effort that is put into crafting the transitions and all of that. Like the way Martin Scorsese, describes the transitions and some of the camera movements that they achieved in the Taxi Driver and stuff like that. I think that really gives you an idea of how camera movements and even character movements work differently for a movie. Like even like you attended Mami, so I'm guessing you must have seen A Day on a Sunday. It was a short film in the Royal Stack section. It's based on a town in Nagaland, and the way the director Teja, the way the team captures the characters' movements across the frames, and these are some of the things that you really come to appreciate after you see a lot of films and listen to directors' interviews and stuff like that. Like mainly, I would say my journey on Letterboxd. That is something that has been vital to my analysis, like looking at how others have analyzed in their reviews. I think that's also something that helped. And something that I try to do once I started my journey on Letterboxd is that when I pick a director, I go through their entire filmography just to understand the journey that they went through. And like filmmakers like Abbas Kiarostami and even Scorsese, like I was able to appreciate the journey that happened in their career in terms of how they use not just in their writing but also visually how they place these characters and the staging when it comes to Kurosawa and Satyajit Ray. I think these two are like my teachers for staging. So yeah, like watching a lot of films, I think that gives you a different sense of appreciation for how things are conveyed in a movie.
Yeah, I think like I was actually, and I because I really enjoy reading Letterboxd reviews, and I noticed that in October you saw about 48 films, and in September you saw over 50 films, which I was so shocked by, and I think filmmakers really like watching films is in a lot of ways your education, right? You
Hmm.
by watching films you are learning different elements, and I think that is like the best way to sort of learn and acquire new storytelling techniques, sound design techniques, new visual setting techniques. So, like, I think the amount of time you've put into watching films is just commendable, like it's really like surprising. Like, and this is more of a philosophical question, Manoj, and I don't know if it is like the right question as well, but since the emergence of film as a medium, right, in the 1900s after photography came, how has films like what has watching films taught you about life, like it's more of like a philosophical question, like why do humans watch films, or according to you, what has it taught you about life?
I think from watching, spending a lot of time with filmmakers like, Michelangelo Antonioni and or even Chiaroscumi, something that I learned about existing is that, people inevitably everyone tends to go in a monotonous life. Like, no matter how much, uh, people start off in their life. Like when everyone starts out, they always think that they will, stand out as one of the 0.1% of the percentage of the population. And most of the stories that you see that deal with existentialism, they're always about characters not being able to accept the fact that that this is it, that there's not going to be more than this. Like filmmakers like Richard Linklater, who spends a lot of time showing the passage of how a character has to deal with the concept of time. And I think in a way, movies are a small sort of escape. Like even when it comes to a country like India, where movies are not only seen as an art form, but it's also seen as a celebration. And people are just trying to break away from their monotonous life, from the hardships of their life, and they're just trying to just give away into the the celebration that is happening on screen. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think, I guess, every filmmaker has been dealing with the idea of character just trying to break away from what they are. Well, most of them are trying to run away from themselves, or not accepting themselves, and a lot of this journey comes with, it ends with, either they accept themselves or they don't, and they don't realize it. Like even when you come to a more accessible movie like Greta Gerwig's directorial debut, Lady Bird, like how she rejects even the idea of her name, the identity of her family and that of her hometown, and having to accept the fact that maybe this is what's going to be it. This is what she is, and she has to accept that. And that is something I'd say that I learned most from watching movies, and from how different filmmakers deal with these ideas. And even for people who don't deal with existentialism per se, like people like Koreeda or most of the filmmakers in Malayalam cinema who deal mostly with the relationships in a family. I think there's also, you can also sense that similar ideas of isolation and uh, the connecting to someone or even disconnecting with people, having your own independence, or having that urge to find a family somewhere. Like there is always that theme of running away from the person you are, or always going to that the greener pastures. Even with the movie that we saw in Mami, the opening film, all we imagine is life, where every character sees green pastures on the other side, and it's almost about trying to accept what they have, right in front of her in the present. And that's something. That's, I think, the idea that I learned most from filmmaking and storytelling in children.
Yeah, that's beautifully put, Manoj. And I like I'm thinking about like my relationship with films as well. I know when I lost someone very close to me, it was hard to speak about that experience to friends, because I was finding it hard to bring them up to date with what was going on in my life. But I would watch a movie like, I don't know, Waiting, and I would slowly understand the, stages of grief. And in a lot of ways, films helped and comfort me, in that time. And, I was also an immigrant at one point, and I remember watching Namesake, and I was able
Mm.
to articulate emotions and experiences that that character was going through and make sense of my experience in that moment as well, and I don't know, I remember reading this research somewhere where there is like a neuron in your brain called a mirror neuron, where I think the research, and I'll have to like back this up and you'll have to read it further, but it says that when you watch something, your brain is almost acting like it is actually experiencing it, and it releases the same sort of neurotransmitters as if you were. So when we watch all these emotions, like sadness, happiness, or like characters going through these graphs, or maybe not even going through these graphs, I feel like we also in some way go through the same journey, like. And like Manoj, like one of the main questions I really wanted to ask you was if you could tell me about, three films, and I know it'll be very hard for you because, you have so many films, but and what I really loved about your Letterboxd profile was right below your description, you had like a chart that gave stars and what were those stars, that what did they mean? And some films that had 5 stars were really good films. Like, so can you tell me about three films that you think were like almost pitch perfect on all the elements of filmmaking according to you, and and can you elaborate on why you think those were really good films according to you?
A movie that I didn't give 5 stars, but I think it's a benchmark for filmmaking for me would be Forrest Gump, because a lot of people have their own issues with it. But what I really love about that film is that it's just enjoyable. I mean, you don't have to like really analyze it in terms of any filmmaking elements, or in terms of a visual storytelling, or even you can just sit there laid back and just enjoy the beauty of that story, because the emotions carried through the story and the performance itself is so captivating. And I think that's something that really I aspire to make one day, that just regular people. I mean, I don't want to say regular people, like people who watch movies casually, or even family, they can just come to the theater and they can just watch a movie and they don't have to think about anything, but it can be so emotionally captivating that it leaves their impact on you as you leave the theater. And I think that's why Forrest Gump became like a emotional benchmark for me. If you're talking in terms of filmmaking elements alone, and again how it really captivates you, I think Edward Yang's Yi, that's a movie that really inspired me, because the way he uses the colors throughout his movies, or the way he stays with the characters' performances, or the way he, you know, frames the characters in their own ways of isolation and how they're dealing it. A lot of it isn't happening in the writing alone, but a lot of it is happening in the visuals and how he frames it, the long distance shots that frames these characters, against the bland architecture of Taipei. I mean, that's something that Edward Yang uses in most of his films, like Taipei Story, where the architecture really stands out as the bigger element than the characters alone. Um, so yeah, the Edward Yang's most of the movies are like a huge inspiration for me. Like, and then when it comes to different elements of how much you can achieve by staging, through how much you can push your actors for the to bring out the best, and how much ambitious you can be with the production design, how much detail that goes into it. I think Akira Kurosawa's Ran, that's another benchmark for me, because again, it's another movie where you don't have to like visualize a lot, but you can just sit there, relax comfortably, and still it just holds you. Um, so yeah, like I would say these three movies are some of the benchmarks for me.
Yeah, like for you mentioned that one of the things you did was, watching the entire chronology of a filmmaker. And, so can you tell me about one filmmaker who you thought, like from their first film to their last film, like there was a real evolution in terms of artistic vision? And what do you think? Because one thing I've noticed, whether it's like filmmakers I like or international filmmakers, I noticed there are certain themes that sometimes emerge from a filmmaker's sort of collection of films that they've made, right? And they don't. I remember Imtiaz Ali, when I was at the Mami Festival, saying that the filmmaker doesn't consciously think about those themes, but it is for the viewer, and to somehow take those themes out of that collection or body of work, right? So can you tell me about one director's work and how you saw that evolution happen for them, Manoj?
One really good example would be Krzysztof Kieslowski, the Polish filmmaker. He was behind the famous Three Colors trilogy. And one thing I really noticed is that towards from his initial movies, he really spent a lot of time in material that was more politically charged, because we're talking about a filmmaker who grew up in a country that was grappling with the ideas of a different level of communism and how people are trying to break away from there. And so you see a lot of that appearing in his movies in a very strong manner. And then towards the middle portions of it, am I audible? Okay, so like towards the middle portions of it, like with movies like Camera Buff or even Blind Chances, we are seeing him trying to mix his ideas about the political commentary and a little of religious commentary in it as well. And I think some of it roots uh, in his upbringing in Poland at the time. The amount of appreciation that he has for the religious communities and the amount of the togetherness that they have in Abrahamic religions. I think that's something that really captivated him throughout his mid journey. And then when he goes to his later part of his life, like with films like Decalogue, uh, well, not film, it's a series of short films. And then you go into his famous Three Colors trilogy. Like you see the religious themes really captivating him. Even with his movie like Double Life of Veronique, that's a movie that really stays away from any kind of political commentary, and it just sticks to the religious aspect of it. And like he really tries to understand like how there are so many people in this world, but who are connected unknowingly or knowingly with each other. And I think again, growing up in a communist in a society that was grappling with the ideas of communism, I think that's something that really sparked the amount of religious discussion that happened within himself. And you see that evolution happening from his initial political commentary towards his end. And if I'm not mistaken, he was going to make another trilogy that was solely based on the ideas of, I think, heaven and hell. Like there were ideas like that he was going to do, and then he sadly passed away after um, the third part of the Three Colors trilogy. And yeah, I think he's uh, the filmmaker where I would say there's like that clear evolution from his start to the end. I mean, with filmmaker like Kurosawa, I mean, again, he's someone, I think his narratives represented the changing times in Japan. Like, if you look at his earlier films, a lot of it, some of it were directed as propaganda movies, because he was living in at a time when the filmmakers may not have the amount of freedom that they had after uh, the World War II. And yeah, so and then after that time period collapsed, and he started exploring more into the post World War Japan, and he also got the freedom to explore some of the issues that Japanese citizens faced during the period of World War One, and then you slowly go see him move away from that, as because people moved away from the World War experiences and they were trying to build a new world in Japan, and so I think even Kurosawa was trying to expand his reach at the time, like with movies like Seven Samurai and um, The Hidden Fortress, that were not exactly like limited to Japanese audiences, but they could be accessible worldwide as well. So, and you see that carried throughout his movies, like, and then there are problems that he faced because of the revolution of the TV production that happened, which affected the theater releases, and it also affected his career as well. And then you see him jumping back. There are a few dips here and there, but you also see how the history of Japan and how the history of filmmaking in Japan has influenced his career as well. So yeah, I think these two filmmakers, yeah.
That was really fascinating to listen to, Manoj, because I think, filmmakers also respond to the historical, political, and social events of the day. And, if you are, very sensitive to those topics, that can also seep into your narration because the characters you maybe write about are living in a specific historical, political, and social environment. And I think I also liked what you said about technology changing. Like now you have artists coming out and creating works in, virtual reality, and
Mm.
it's just interesting to think about how technology also changes, that artistic vision in some way. For the final question, Manoj, I know you were at Mami recently, and I'm just wondering what is the filmmaker's experience at a film festival like? Like what did you learn from participating in all these film festivals? Because like the I attended the Mumbai Film Festival and I was fortunate to attend the Toronto Film Festival. I really love this experience, but I only attend it as a viewer, as a someone that loves film. So, like, do you think attending film festivals helps you as a filmmaker, and why do you think that is the case, or why not?
As to how film festivals can help as a filmmaker, I mean, I have only attended one film festival as a delegate, as a general delegate. That was the 2022 edition of IFFK, and that is the one of the core events that shaped my interest for filmmaking as well. Because like even sitting at a house, sitting in a hometown, like there are only a few film nerds that you can talk to actually. But then you go to a film festival, like every person there is a filmmaking nerd or a film nerd in a way. Like you can just approach any person and they'll be interested to talk about movies. They'll be interested in listening to you. Like it's essentially a small bubble in itself of film knowledge. So I think that kind of regular discussions on films, that's something that really inspired me and really gave me the thought that okay, this is where I belong. I should be venturing more into this. So yeah, as someone who's aspiring to be a filmmaker, film festivals are a huge opportunity. Not just because you get to watch a lot of international movies, but you also get to engage in a lot of meaningful discussions with people, or even with filmmakers that you meet. You get to meet at a film festival as well. As a filmmaker, how that is different is that you get to spend a lot of professionals from the industry. Like I mentioned before, that I was able to interact with the team of Girls Who Be Girls, or even other filmmakers as well, who they give you insights about how about mostly about the production period or even throughout the distribution period, and the different systems that you can avail as a filmmaker, or maybe if you're from a marginalized community, how you can avail for certain uh, measures to help you proceed as a filmmaker as well. I think that's what really differentiates from a general delegate and a filmmaker from being invited to a filmmaking event. Um, you don't get as much as time to immerse yourself in watching movies because you spend a lot of time interacting with the professionals from the film industry and even other filmmakers. Like I got a chance to really interact with the filmmakers from the Royal Stack session. I got a chance to talk with people from whose films were selected for the Focus South Asia section, like the director of Angamal, or even some of the short films that were selected for the Focus South Asia. And so yeah, I think that's how much difference it makes. Like it really helps you create the context that may be helpful for you in the future, because it's not just more people who are interested in filmmaking, but these are also, we're also talking about editors and musicians and producers and distributors, a lot of really talented people in the industry that you can meet, um, who can also show interest in your work as well. So yeah, they're incredibly useful for a filmmaker. If you're going into filmmaking, they're incredibly useful for making connections.
That's great, Manoj. And on that positive note, we come to an end of this podcast, Manoj. I will be linking the Letterboxd link to Sombre Skies and in the show notes, and I highly recommend following Manoj on Letterboxd. There are so many reviews that he has done, and I I really appreciate, because there are some reviews that go on for like 7 or 8 paragraphs, and each paragraph has so much nuance and detail. So I learned a lot about films, like reading your reviews, and in a lot of ways, I never saw certain elements that I saw after reading your reviews. So for the viewers, I highly recommend following Manoj on Letterbox. If you don't know what Letterbox is, it's basically a community where people can share film reviews and maintain a diary of the films that you have seen, and you can create a free account and follow other film lovers and connect with other film nerds. So until next time, do stay tuned for more such interviews of young Indians defining the future of our country. And this is the teacher tuber and Abhishek Shetty signing off on this episode of Learning Stories.